This is the bequiet Silent Loop 3, the latest all-in-one CPU cooler from the company's flagship lineup. It has a few tricks up its sleeve and sleeves on its tubes, plus a gorgeous RGB cooling block. But does it have the cooling chops to go with its illuminated cooling block? And can this mid-priced AIO stand out in the crowd? Lock in, because we're going to spill the tea on the Silent Loop 3 right here, right now on Robeytech. From cases to CPU coolers, bequiet has been a major player in the world of PC building, especially among enthusiasts that want to keep their gaming rigs cool and quiet. The Silent Loop 3 is the latest entry in this high-performance line of coolers aimed at balancing powerful cooling with silent performance. Not only that, it has a colorway that could make any PC builder feel like Knight Rider, which is great for that cross-section of you that are like into RGB and also love David Hasselhoff. Go ahead, raise your hands. Yeah, the two of you. Yeah, we see you. But here's the thing, even though the Silent Loop 3 sits at the top of bequiet's cooler lineup, there's no guarantee it will sit at the top of our performance charts. Where will it land when we put it through its paces and when we look at pricing? Well, we're gonna find out together, but before we dive in, we should thank bequiet for sending us the Silent Loop 3 for this review. Starting with pricing, for an all-in-one cooler positioned as being high performance, the Silent Loop 3 is surprisingly reasonable. The 360mm version we're looking at today will run you roughly $160. It's also available in 240 and 420mm variants for around $140 and $175 respectively. But as we've seen a lot lately, prices can inch higher or lower depending on what's happening with the market. Overall, the pricing isn't bad, but how does it stack up against AIOs like it? Well, it's not the cheapest AIO you'll find for performance cooler from a well-known brand, but it's far from the most expensive. For context, the $160 price tag puts it just slightly higher than the Arctic Liquid Freezer 3 ARGB at $150, but it comes in a full $60 more expensive than the Lian Galahad 2, which you should definitely check out the review of right here because it's an awesome cooler. Now, comparing it to brands like Corsair with its IQ Link H150i RGB at $240, you get the sense that bequiet is exercising some chill when it comes to its pricing. But just understand, pricing is wild out there right now, and all of this is very subject to change. What we're seeing at the time of recording right now is, sure, it's not the cheapest performance AIO on the market, but it's not overly expensive. It's like the Goldilocks. It's like that sweet spot between price and performance. Now, when it comes to compatibility, the Silent Loop 3 leans a little bit more heavily towards Team Blue than Team Red, with its range of socket support and the shape of its cold plate, but still comes with everything you need to crown multiple generations of CPUs. For Intel, it supports everything from the Intel AI-enabled Core Ultra 200S series processors all the way back to classic i7 2700Ks. That's socket LG 1851 to 1155 for those who are counting. For AMD, you have support for AM5, AM4, TR5, and TR4. So if you're using a Ryzen processor, bequiet's got you covered. While the Silent Loop 3 offers support for a number of sockets, that means a lot of different mounting hardware. For Intel, the Silent Loop 3 uses a typical back bracket system, but it also uses both rubber washers and plastic spacers, as well as 2 additional brackets to mount the pump head onto your CPU. As for AMD, you replace the 2-point mounting system with an included motherboard clip for another 2-point bracket system. This is where you'll need to be careful on either platform. Since the Silent Loop 3 uses 2 fasteners on top of a dual bracket system, you'll need to make sure that both fasteners are threaded properly and tightened evenly. In other words, if one of them isn't tightened correctly, it could impact heat distribution, leading to higher temps and potential overheating. None of this is to say that the Silent Loop 3 is terrible to install exactly, it just requires a bit more care and attention to detail. If you're planning on installing it once and leaving it until your next upgrade, getting this right once, not that bad. Just understand that there's a bit more time required to get it positioned properly. Speaking of more time, the cooler doesn't come with fans pre-installed, so you'll need to attach those to the radiator before installation. There's also cable management that needs to be done with 3 fans, and all having individual wires that need to be tied into a PWM splitter. There's a lot of cable spaghetti, so cable management is necessary. Well, unless you're a monster, which please tell me you're not. Now, once it's done though, all 3 fans can be controlled by your motherboard, but do you know what can't be controlled by your motherboard? Liking and subscribing here at Robeytech and Robeytech Live. Only you have the power to do that, and while you're at it, go ahead and tap that notification bell so you don't miss other content like this on both of our channels. Now that we know what it takes to get the Silent Loop 3 installed, let's look at how it does its job. The Silent Loop 3 uses a 3-chamber pump complete with an internal dampener to sweep away its heat with a minimum amount of noise. It can spin up to 3,500 RPM or as low as 1,700 RPM, and you can tailor its speed to the temperature of your processor when connected using the aforementioned PWM header. But let's be honest, if cooling potential was tied to style, this thing would would be ice cold, with the design of the RGB pump head and sleek blacked out design. The 3 Silent Wing 4 fans are RGB free and embrace their name with the vibration reducing motors for quiet operation, coming in at only 31.2 decibels, running at max speed. At least that's what bequiet says on paper. As for how much air they can push, at the full 2500 RPM, these fans can move up to 76.7 CFM of air with 3.96 millimeters of mmH2O static pressure to exhaust thermals from the Radiator. The Radiator has a pretty standard thickness of 27 millimeters, as do the Silent Wing 4 fans at 25 millimeters. But with the standard profile, neither should get in the way of working inside of your PC. But wait, the Radiator does have one thing special about it. You can actually refill its fluids over time. By unscrewing the fill port just to the side of the Radiator, you're able to add the included fluid to keep it topped off. How necessary is this? Well, it's probably not, at least not for 4 or 5 years, but for the love of all the components in your system, if you're going to refill the Radiator, take it slow and don't cross-thread that screw. Nobody likes a moist motherboard. Gross. Just saying the word moist, just ugh. Now with all that out of the way, it's time to talk about our test results. bequiet makes some big claims in its marketing and positioning of this cooler as a performance part. So we're going to put it to the test to see how it stacked up. Now remember, we test all of our AIOs in both Intel and AMD test systems. These systems have been built to be as identical as possible, and all of our testing is done in the same conditions, so everything you see is apples to apples. And just as an FYI, we do all of our testing inside of actual PC cases. So what you're seeing is true to life examples of how these perform based on the hardware inside. We're also still in the process of rebuilding our AMD results, sorry about this. So thanks for bearing with us while we continue this process. I know we keep saying this, but we're getting closer with every new AIO we test. We're almost there. Now let's kick things off with Intel. The Silent Loop 3 lands squarely in the middle with an idle temp of 28 degrees Celsius. Now for comparison, both versions of the Arctic Liquid Freezer 3 managed to beat it out by a little more than a degree, but on the flip side, it tied with the more expensive Corsair iQ Link H150i and the Asus ROG Ryujin 3. Now under full CPU load, the results are a bit more dicey. The Silent Loop 3 managed to keep our 14700K at around 83 degrees Celsius, falling behind the Arctic Liquid Freezer 3 and the Lianli HydroShift 360S by 1 degree. While the Silent Loop 3 didn't have the worst showing in this test, it's 4 degrees shy of the Lianli Galahad 2 Lite, which you should have watched a review of and we talked about earlier, and is a little bit less expensive. But how do these temps translate into actual performance in CPU-heavy workloads? Well, that's where Cinebench comes in, testing CPU performance explicitly to see how its thermal performance compares to its competitor. In this test, the Silent Loop 3 again lands squarely in the middle of the pack. Now turning to power draw, bequiet appears to be spinning multiple plates with the cooler, balancing between performance and noise levels with power efficiency, and ending up somewhere in the middle. Clearly it's far from the coldest AIO we've tested, but it placed toward the bottom of our rankings in wattage in all but one test. At idle, it drew a little over 3 watts while under load and bumped up to 237 watts. For context, that's just a hair higher than both Liquid Freezer 3 versions at idle, but 4 or 5 watts less under heavy draw. During the gaming benchmarks, it pulled 102 watts, while both versions of the Arctic Liquid Freezer 3 sat comfortably anywhere between 94 to 96 watts. And speaking of gamings, we still need to talk about temps here. In our gaming benchmarks, the Silent Loop 3 didn't quite land where bequiet had hoped it would. While it kept our processor cool enough to game without trouble, the Silent Loop 3 landed low in our charts, averaging 53 degrees Celsius in our benchmarks. The only worst performers were the Corsair H150i at 54 degrees and the Trix Panorama SE ARGB, which inched another degree higher. Now turning over to AMD, we swapped over to Team Red's counterpart to the 14700K, the Ryzen 7 7700X. Here the results tipped further from bequiet's favor. For both idle and full load temperatures, the Silent Loop 3 scored toward the bottom of our charts. Idle temperatures landed in the lower side of the middle at 38 degrees alongside the Fractal Lumen S36 V2. Under load and for gaming, it placed second to last, measuring 90 degrees Celsius under load and 54 degrees while gaming. However, in Cinebench, the Silent Loop 3 actually did well, coming in second place just behind the Lianli Galahad 2 Lite, though to be fair, the results are so close across all of AMD's tested AIOs, so it's kind of a hollow second place. But hey, still on the podium, right? Now the story of power draw is also similar. It was the most power efficient AIO we've tested at idle on the AMD side, averaging only 26 watts, while jumping up to 145 watts under load, mirroring most other AIOs in our roundup. Gaming wattages also showed a bit more variation, but it tied our three most power efficient at around 75 watts of power draw. Now moving on to noise levels, we're still working on this, guys. It's getting bigger, and we know how important this is to some of you. Understand though that your all-in-one cooler is almost always going to be quieter than your case fans, and that's definitely true here. So we recommend quiet case fans before worrying about an extra decibel or two from your CPU cooler. Now still, the Silent Loop 3 and Be Quiet put references to noise in their name, and with cooling performance that's squarely in the middle of the pack, can it deliver where noise levels actually matter? Well, we're still building our charts out, but this one lands close to the bottom, so not the Be Quiet is showing. That being said, 66 decibels is the noise level of like a normal conversation or a dishwasher, so unless you're running your PC at max speed all the time, or your CPU is doing some heavy lifting, or you hate dishwashers, this likely won't bother you. So is the Silent Loop 3 worth picking up at full retail price? To figure this out, we actually have a pretty simple formula. We take the CPU thermal max, which is 100 degrees Celsius, subtract its temperature under load, and divide the amount by its retail price to find its dollar per degree cooling value. We can use this to compare different AIOs in an objective way, at least by this metric. Taking the results from our test, the Silent Loop 3 earned a relative value score of 12.3, putting it below both versions of the Arctic Liquid Freezer 3, the Lee & Lee Galahad 2 Lite, and the Fractal Lumen S36 V2. So it's not a great value compared to these AIOs, but it's still better than the Corsair IQ Link H150i RGB. With the data and details on the table, should you pick up the Be Quiet Silent Loop 3 to keep your processor cool? I know you're probably sick of hearing us say this, but there is no one-size-fits-all tech solution, and the Silent Loop 3 is proof of that. There are some of you that just like the way this looks and think, is it going to be good enough? Can it keep a modern CPU heat in check? That depends on the CPU and how hard you need to push it. We probably wouldn't recommend this for like intense overclocking or high performance, high heat CPUs like high-end Threadrippers or anything like that. It doesn't lead our charts thermally or from a noise level standpoint, but it can still keep your processor cool enough to run well if you're just gaming or using an average PC. For that goal, it doesn't need to be a chart leader, it just needs to be cool enough. And overall, we think it succeeds in that goal. Now, as far as installation goes, we're really not a fan of the two-point system the Silent Loop 3 uses, especially for beginner builders. You really do need to be careful about CPU contact here, and for the unseasoned PC DIYer, this could cause trouble over time. But if you're a seasoned PC DIYer and you can take your time, we really like the RGB design on the pump head. It has a Knight Rider meets cyberpunk aesthetic that's actually pretty cool. Now there's another point working in the Silent Loop 3's favor, and that's the refillable reservoir. While most people never even consider changing the coolant in their AIO, because usually it's not possible, the Silent Loop 3's ability to do so means that it can actually be maintained, hopefully giving it a long life. Just be sure the rubber grommet is seated properly to avoid leaks. That would just be bad. So where does that leave us with the Be Quiet Silent Loop 3? Well, that depends on what you value the most. A few degrees less, a few less decibels, or a few less dollars in your pocket. Ultimately, the choice is up to you. With all that said, that's what we think about the Be Quiet Silent Loop 3, but we talk to ourselves all the time here at Robeytech. We want to hear what you think. Is the trade-off between noise levels and cooling worth it? Are you willing to pay extra for a few decibels and the ability to refill coolant? Do those extra few degrees even matter in real life? Let us know down in the comments below. Now, while you're down there, go ahead and slap that subscribe button with that like button and ring that notification bell so that you get a notification each and every time we post a video like this, either here on Robeytech or also do it over at Robeytech Live. And if you want to continue the conversation, talk about questions we ask in these videos or ask questions of yourself or someone else, head over to our Discord server, discord.gg/Robeytech. It's an amazing place to talk to other tech and PC enthusiasts about stuff like this. And hey, you know what? You might just make a friend while you're there. Also, make sure you follow us on Robeytech on all your favorite social media platforms. Thank you so much for making it this far. I want to say a huge thank you for sticking with me throughout this video, and I look forward to seeing you on the next one.